Welcome to the Elder Law Growth Podcast. Nobody should pass away without a solid plan in place, and everyone should be able to age with dignity. That is why we are on a mission to help elder law and estate planning firms grow their practices online so that they can create a lasting legacy for families everywhere.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Elder Law Growth Podcast. My name is Dan Hafner, your host. This week's topic is the story behind the story. As always, I appreciate you all joining. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode. All right, so this week we are going to go a little bit high level here. We're going to start this journey down the Elder Law Growth Podcast with your firm's story, okay? So just stick with me through this episode. I promise this is all going to make sense towards the end, but I want to give a little bit of a backstory here, right, into the story concept. So if you're not already confused, let's go. So let's look at things from a 30,000 foot view, right? We're up in the plane, we're 30,000 feet above, and we're looking at your business as an elder law, estate planning attorney, wherever in the country you might be, right? This type of industry is not something that people are always seeking, right? It's something that's needed, obviously, but it's not something that is always sexy or appealing or, always on TV commercials and things that people crave, right? So there needs to be a different type of story told. If you look at businesses, if you look at Super Bowl commercials, you look at TV commercials, every business that, is worth their salt in the marketing or sales world, especially in the digital space, has a story, right? There's jingles that are catchy. There's brand names, there's brand recognition. And the question to ask yourself is, does my practice have this, right? Am I recognizable? Is there a brand that we're putting forward that people always recognize us by, or recognize me by as the head attorney, or maybe you're a solo attorney, or whatever the case might be, right? So when you think about this in terms of a customer of yours, a potential client, right? Everything has to make sense. Like why, ultimately they want their problem solved, right? They have assets they need to protect, or they have nursing home costs they need to repair, or whatever the case might be, right? But they also need to trust you. They need to know who they're working with, that you're actually going to take care of them. You're going to really care about them. And that's what really separates you from your competition, right? So in their mind, it has to make sense why you do what you do, right? When people ask me, hey, Dan, how did you get into this? Or how did you get into that? Or how did you get into podcasting in the first place, right? When I tell them the story about how I got into business for myself, how I started doing things, and then why I wanted to start a podcast, it made sense, right? It made sense to people, and they're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. Let's talk or whatever. So in terms of that, people could understand why. They could understand the why, which is the story behind the story, right? There's a story of what the business is and what we do and how we help and the results we get. But then there's a story behind that. So a good way to drive this home and to really think about it is Marvel. Now, stick with me. You might not be, I'm not even a Marvel fan myself. I've never followed them. I never followed the comics growing up. I never did any of that, right? But I've watched enough movies and I've seen enough of the formula to know exactly what works. Now, if you think about Superman or Batman or the movies themselves, okay, all of these movies start with what? They start with a backstory, right? There would be no connection that you would have with Batman or Superman or Iron Man or whoever if you didn't see their backstory, if you didn't know where they came from, if you didn't know how they got into the situation that they're in or why they act like they do, right? And the same thing applies inside of your firm, inside of your particular business, right? People need to understand why you do what you do. Like, why did you get into estate planning in the first place? Why did you decide to practice elder law, right? Was there a tragedy that happened in your family a long time ago? Was there, a scandalous money, estate fiasco when a grandparent or a parent or a sibling or somebody passed away in your family or a friend's family? Or were you practicing a different kind of law before? And now you've moved into over into estate planning and elder law for a particular reason? Because that is the reason. That story right there is going to help you hook people, right? It's going to help people make a personal connection with you. Now, it might turn some people off, and that's okay, right? You're not trying to make everyone your client. You're only trying to make the right people your client, right? And that's really what this whole process of putting together your firm's story and the why behind what you do, because you're going to start attracting the right clients, right? Because when you think about where they are, what they're doing, how they speak, how they think, what's going on in their life, if you're consistent with your story and you're very purposeful and you're very clear about what your story is and why you do what you do and where you're going inside of that purpose, you're going to attract the right kind of people. I've seen it happen many, many times, not only inside of the elder law and estate planning business or an industry, but inside of many other industries as well. Right. And I used to think that client attraction was a myth. It's not. I promise it really, really works. And you've probably experienced some of that for yourself. Right. So remember, it's about the why, not the how. And people really don't care how you got into practicing, estate planning or elder law. They don't really care. They care about why, right? So if you tell that story about why, that emotionally charged backstory of, hey, I was practicing trial law and I decided, after my grandmother died and left nothing and our entire family fell apart, that I wanted to get into elder law, right? There's people that will resonate with that story. And you have to know your audience, right? So you have to know exactly how to switch the story, how to change the story, and not that you're making it up and lying, but that you're adjusting it to your audience, right? There's certain people that are going to resonate with that. There's certain people that are not. So if you have the same story and the same purpose and the same why, the surroundings and the circumstances behind that can be fluid and they can be relevant to your audience. So that's exactly what I'm saying is this the right story told to the right clients is going to get you the right impact. So now when we think about this entire thing that I've talked about here for the past 7 minutes inside of the digital marketing space or the digital space, right? Inside of your website, inside of your Facebook page, maybe you have an Instagram page or a YouTube channel, a LinkedIn page, like whatever it might be, right? Your story and your backstory, your origin story, whatever you want to call it, needs to be the same, right? It needs to be synonymous. So no matter where people find you, they know that, hey, Mr. Lawyer Dan over here is this type of person. Like I either am turned on or turned off by that person. And I'm not talking about in a weird sexual kind of way. I'm talking about in a, hey, I would like to work with this person type of way. I'm turned on by what they're saying. That they're resonating with me. And maybe this probably, you notice this inside of the podcast, right? You either probably resonate with my tone, with the things that I'm saying and the way that I'm actually approaching this podcast, or you don't. At which point you're obviously not listening. So if you are listening, you probably do resonate, right? So I'm trying to even just practice what I'm preaching here, right? Because when I talk about how I got into this podcast, and I probably didn't even give you guys enough of a backstory, right? I did another podcast. I still do another podcast called Run Your Day, which I got into and I started doing work with Bambiz. And then we started to try to do this podcast. So I already had those skills. I had, that show has over 300 episodes. Like I got the podcasting game kind of down. I got the voice, I got the flow, whatever the case might be. I'm no Joe Rogan. I'm no, crazy, awesome, cool podcaster or anything like that. But, I know what I'm doing enough to be able to do this. And that's what your clients care about, right? That you might not be, maybe even if you're new inside of the estate planning and elder law industry, right? You still know more about it, incredibly amount more about it than your clients do. And then telling them that story and portraying yourself as that potential expert and solution to their problem is going to be the exact, because, okay, I didn't really finish that thought, but right. When we think about why people, even you as a person, why you make the decisions you do in terms of buying, right? People buy with emotion and they justify with logic, right? So it's logical. They need an estate plan. They need someone to help them with their nursing care stuff. They need help with inheritance setting up. That's a logical thing. That's why they came to you as an attorney. But they're going to buy with that emotion, right? And that story that you tell that is emotionally charged, that connects with them on a deeper level than just their brain. It connects with their heart. It connects with their soul even. That's where you're going to have more consultations lead to clients, where you're going to have more webinars convert people into consultations and eventual clients. That right there is going to be the secret sauce that people are going to look around and be like, how do you have so many clients? How are you growing and having different, branches and different, hiring new people? It's because you are being real with people. You're being very honest, very upfront, and very clear in your story, in your why. And you're portraying that on your website. You're portraying that on your YouTube channel. You're portraying that in the posts that you make on Facebook. So, right, some practical things that you can do coming out of this episode to check and make sure that your story is in alignment and is actually good to go is first, you got to think about your story. Maybe go back in time, go for a walk, go for a drive, whatever the case you got to do. Think about why you got into this. Maybe you know it off the top of your head already. You know your story. You know the path that you took that got you into estate planning or elder law, right? So on your website, is it just highlights of your degrees and your case wins and your statistics and your family life and all that different stuff? Or is it an actual story? Is it your story about why you got into it, how you got into it? Because that's going to resonate more on your website with people, right? And think about this in terms of how you can connect this in your Facebook and your YouTube channel and in any other digital assets you have out there. And it all needs to be the same. It needs to be synonymous. It needs to be all taken care of at the same level. So there's a consistent brand message and a story message that you're putting out there into your potential clients inside of the world, no matter where they are, whether they find you on their website, they call you, they go on your Facebook, whatever the case might be, right? So once you have that story, practice it. Practice it, practice it, practice it, practice it. I promise you will get bored with your story long before your potential clients get bored with your story. So even if you're doing videos on Facebook or YouTube or whatever the case might be, or in a newsletter, right? Your clients will not get tired of your story before you do. I promise. I used to think, oh wow, if I tell my story again and again and again and again and again, people are going to get bored. Well, guess what? Your audience changes. There's people that follow you today, people that follow you tomorrow that might not be following you 6 months from now, right? So there's new people, there's new audience members, there's new things always coming into your world that you can constantly adjust with, okay? And as we think about this as well, right? This show is mainly focused on the digital aspect of elder law, estate planning, in terms of your digital and your online presence. But even when you think about this in terms of your offline methods, whether it's a newspaper you're using, a TV commercial, direct mail, whatever the case might be that you're using to market and advertise your firm, you got to think about this too, right? Are you telling the right story? Are you aligning with the brand message that you have? Are you being consistent? And that is the main thing that you can focus on as an elder law and estate planning attorney, right? Just consistency in your story and telling it the same way over and over and over and over at different lengths and different things. So the main takeaway from this show, get clear on your story and practice it. Practice it on your drive to work, practice it on your drive home from work, practice it in random walks during the day, whatever the case might be. But the more you practice the story, the better it's going to be and the more emotionally charged. I'm not talking about being able to make people cry on will, right? But like just figuring out how you can employ, emotion into it, a little bit of pain into it, triumph into it. Think about the origin story of how you got into this, why that's emotionally connected, and how that's emotionally connected to the people you're going to be talking with. Okay. So that is all for this episode. As always, I appreciate you guys joining. You can always check out bambiz.net or elderlawgrowthpodcast.com for more information and more stuff and show notes on the show. Please subscribe if you haven't already where you're listening to this. We always appreciate any reviews and shares of the podcast. If you know of anyone who might be interested in this, that could get value out of it, we would appreciate that as well. All right, my friends, I will talk to you next week. It's been a pleasure. Dan Hafner signing off. Talk to you next time.